to Speak Out. I'm your host, JL.
And I'm your other host, Dino L.
And guess what, Dino? On today's show, we are talking about preparing for service, the gift of volunteering. And y'all know how I do. Here's my quote. One of the greatest gifts you can give is your time. And giving us her time today on Speak Out is hailing all the way from Chicago, Illinois.
All right.
It's Jacinda Beason. She is over JLB Consulting, and she's been consulting over 10 years. Excuse me, 10 years.
She's not even 20 years old.
I know. I don't know how I messed that up, but over 10 years, and she's worked with a lot of major nonprofits. And so today we're going to talk to her about serving and the gift of volunteering.
All right.
Welcome to Speak Out,
Welcome,
Jacinda.
Mrs.
Thank
Beason.
you for having me. We are so glad to have you here. So tell us a little bit about JLB Consulting.
JLBeason Consulting is, I'm a corporate anthropologist, and so I work with...
Okay, hold on. You're going to explain what corporate because I heard of anthropology, but what is a corporate anthropologist?
Well, anthropology is the study of cultures.
Okay.
It has always been something I've had to explain. Being in the corporate setting is just what that is, working with people, almost like public relations. And so what I do is help analyze the relationships of a company, their employees, their partners, and it is actually evolved into more than just volunteerism. I've done moderating, I've done HR training, diversity training. So it's really understanding how people work together, the relationship between people, and making them do better.
Now, I just want to go back to a little bit part of your bio, because in 2010, you also served as a panelist and led a workshop for Emory Medical Volunteerism Conference.
Yes.
So was that connected also to your to JLBeason Consulting?
Yes, that was one of my first opportunities when I decided to start my career as a consultant, and I was informed about the opportunity, so I called, and they were already talking about a lot of medical areas, but they weren't talking about how do you volunteer? What's the responsibilities of those who are volunteering and those who are receiving volunteers? So, yeah, that was a great experience. So I got to be a panelist for that, and then also moderate the workshops that came after.
So, Ms. Beason, what exactly is a racial reconciliation facilitator, and how did you get started in that?
Well, my first job was with World Vision. And everybody knows World Vision.
But for those who don't, who may not be aware, can you tell us a little bit about who they are and what they represent?
Well, because I don't work for the company.
Right.
World Vision is a national nonprofit that works with religious groups. They do a lot of giving back to communities worldwide, helping children, feeding the homeless.
Okay.
And a subsidiary program that they had was called CityLink. So the funny thing is, so I got married young, and my first job was with CityLink. And I remember applying for the job, and I interviewed with the most wonderful boss, Cheryl Cornelius, and I was 6 months pregnant. Wow. And so I thought, I can't get this job at 6 months pregnant. It's not going to work. And we went through, and she asked me, well, you have your degree in anthropology. I went to HBCU. What do you do? How does that connect? And I told her it is the study of cultures. And I focused on culture anthropology, where I could see what people were doing, how they interacted with one another, understanding their background, and a little bit of diversity. And she said, oh, okay. So I interviewed with, long and short of it, I interviewed with the job. And there were only 2 of us and a part-time person. And she said what they needed was someone to do the racial reconciliation trainings.
Okay.
So they had people come from different churches who wanted to do missionary work in the city of Chicago. And my job was to give them the training and then prepare them for service. Now, that was my first job in a career that I didn't know existed, and something that I had to learn how to market myself and my degree because everyone wanted to say anthropology. Oh, is that archaeology? No, that's not archaeology. It's totally different. And I would tell young people that when you decide what you want to major in and what your career, you can't allow people to put you in a box.
Okay.
You have to know how to define your own career and what that means to you. Because you got a degree, but then how will you use it? And that's how I wanted to utilize it, talking to people, working with people, and service.
Well, you mentioned family, you being pregnant. Can you tell us a little bit about your family, about your children?
Well, I've been married for 24 years to a wonderful husband. We met at college, at Barrack Obama College. I got married, as I said, at 23. And I have 3 sons, my 3 sons. A 21-year-old who's at Morehouse, a 19-year-old who's at West Point, and a 17-year-old who we are waiting to get into school.
To fly,
Well,
the clue.
He has some good footsteps to follow.
Yes, with those older brothers.
Yes.
So back to serving. So you were saying that you started off at CityLink in Chicago.
Right.
And so you were telling us about, Dean asked a question about the racial reconciliation. Yeah.
Racial reconciliation. At the time, so this is in the 98. And Chicago, if people aren't familiar with Chicago, Chicago's a great city to live in, but it can be very segregated. And so we had missionary groups coming from all over the United States. But what they sometimes would come with is their preconceived biases on what poor people look like and what city or neighborhood in Chicago, what they needed. They just started assuming
what inner city
looks
like,
and all the divisions that are rooted in racial divisions.
Gotcha.
And so what we would do was discuss the stereotypes of racism. And with Cheryl leading, we created a whole curriculum for that.
Wow.
How do we have some icebreakers? How do we talk to them and have an honest discussion about what that meant before they went into these communities where they were primarily working with minorities.
Right.
And we did not want them to go in with their own biases. And the funny thing is, from that, some of the churches would ask me to come and speak. And I remember going to Kentucky, and I had never been to Kentucky. And I went to Kentucky, and they drove me through all these woods, and I said, oh, Lord, all these trees, am I going to be okay with all these trees? But they were concerned about their own stereotypes. Predominantly white church, and some of the stereotypes that they had experienced was, oh, we're from Kentucky, so we're all barefoot, and we're country, and we don't have an education. So they could relate to what we were talking about, breaking down those stereotypes, helping people unite through service. And that was the wonderful thing about volunteerism, that I realized, oh yeah, this is exactly what I've always been doing, but now there's a name for it. I didn't know that volunteerism actually had a name.
Wow. So was that your first experience in serving, or how would you describe your first experience in serving?
And you know, I really wouldn't even describe it as serving, because growing up, my grandparents had a farm. My grandmother helped in the community all the time. She had showed the women how to do canned goods. And I grew up in Kankakee and moved to Chicago when I was a teenager. But that was a great experience for me to be able to go out and help people, go to the senior citizens place. And it seemed like a natural thing to do. I didn't know that we were volunteering. I thought that we were just being a part of the community. That's what you do with your neighbors. You see a neighbor in need, hey, they need some coats, we're gonna volunteer. Donate your shoes, donate your toys. And not having this hierarchy attitude of, I've got so much more, but understanding that, but for the grace of God, you know, so.
There go I.
Yes. Yeah. So it's always been a part of me. I just didn't know that it was called volunteers. I started out as a biology major.
Okay.
And changed my major to just from taking the class.
Yeah.
So I didn't realize that there was a path for that, or a need for that, until I started working with, until I pledged Delta, and you know, that's all about volunteer.
Delta Sigma Theta?
Delta Sigma Theta sorority.
Well, I say, yo, baby, Kappa Alpha Psi.
There's none better. But that has always, so from the beginning, when I was young, to when I went to college and volunteering, it was not it was not looked at as a big thing. It was looked at as that's what you do.
Okay.
You give back to the community. You participate in the community. You build the community up.
Yeah.
That's what you do. That's Deltas do. And Deltas, always do. So when I left college, that was a natural progression. And coming to the city of Chicago, there's so many areas where you can volunteer, but I never thought that I could make a career out of it.
Wow.
So, Ms. Beason, how does volunteer management and an organizational development, how can that be used in the political realm?
Well, let me say this. A lot of people want to volunteer. I've had the pleasure of working for two of the largest nonprofits, World Vision and American Red Cross. And a lot of people want to volunteer, but they don't know what to do. Mm-hmm. And then on the other end, the people who are receiving them are not always prepared. Training is important. So let me speak to the volunteer first. Okay. When you're interested in something, volunteering is a great way to learn about different things that you may be interested in. Maybe you've never worked on a political campaign and you're just interested in doing it and you learn a lot. It gives you a great venue to be a part of the community. Mm-hmm. But you also have to have a commitment. Sometimes people want to volunteer and don't realize how much of a commitment it is that people are depending on you to do what you said you're going to do. Yeah. And people get excited. I'll never forget during Hurricane Katrina, we had thousands of people. American Red Cross covered 7 counties. And we had thousands of people fill our facilities and they wanted to volunteer. And I want to do anything, I want to help. And so I remember standing on the table saying, if you cannot, and please excuse me, listening audience, if you cannot go in the hole outside, this is not the deployment for you. Because volunteering in that type for disaster relief is bigger than what people realize. Mm-hmm. And once you explain to them the depth of what they're doing, the value of it, the importance of it, all that you will see. We had mental health counselors for that. Then you start stepping back. Okay, well, can I work the phone bank? Maybe I don't want to be deployed. So for the volunteer, you really have to be prepared for that commitment.
But what about from the other perspective?
From the other perspective, the organizational development part of it is when you're receiving volunteers, you want to have a place for them.
Absolutely.
You have to be organized. Volunteers want to come in and they want you to say, what is it that you need me to do? They don't want to have to figure it out.
Very interesting.
And a lot of times organizations are looking at volunteerism as free labor. They are not free labor.
Wow.
And they need to be managed. And you need to have the tools and the resources and someone there to tell them what they need to do in the direction. So training is very important because they represent your brand. Right. And that carries over into staff as well. Staff needs to be trained. You have to have customer service training. You have to have an orientation for your staff because they are out there representing you at all times. Yes. And so for the receiver of volunteers, and as I said, it would even apply to paid staff, you have to introduce your brand. Wow. You have to introduce your people. The worst thing you can do is have volunteers working in the place and no one knows they're there.
Or they're not representing you well.
They're not representing you
well. Or they're not even acknowledged or recognized for what they're bringing to your organization because they're volunteering their time to help bring a service.
Right. So it's about recruitment, retention, recognition.
Wow.
The 3 R's.
Yes. To get ready.
Well, 2020 is a very exciting time in our political climate, and people are looking for ways to volunteer and give their time and to make a difference. One of the organizations that you spoke about is the American Red Cross. Can you just give us a little bit of how you transitioned from CityLink into at the American Red Cross?
Well, I was pregnant with my second son.
So it seems like pregnancy kind of is the transition, right? About new
so my oldest son, I was with CityLink. My second son, Matthew, who's at West Point, I was pregnant with him, and it was a lot. I was like, I can't do this. I need to take a break. So I took a little break, and I had never heard of the Red Cross before.
Are you serious?
I had never heard of the Red Cross. So this is in 2000. when Matthew was born. And I decided to apply for their internship. They had an internship in international services. I was like, oh yes, this is absolutely what I want to do, because international services connected those military people with their families.
Yeah.
And it was right in my lane, and I got to train and orientate the families and tell them how to get reconnected, and it was great. So I started as an intern. And then my boss, Karen Rice, another great boss, wonderful. I've had wonderful bosses. She said, you should go on the volunteer side or community outreach. So I just continued to move through the Red Cross. And in the end, I ended up volunteering and teaching almost every class that they had, except for swimming, because I don't know how to swim.
Okay.
But disaster relief was a big thing for the Red Cross. That is where most of their funds are needed. That is where they do their greatest service. But again, after Hurricane Katrina, my oldest son was 7, and I had another baby in 2000.
Was that another promotion?
Right.
I mean, where did you go from there?
Well, in 2002, I had my youngest son, but in 2005, when Hurricane Katrina hit, my son's birthday is August 31st. And I missed his 7th birthday because I was working 18-hour days. And my husband and I talked about it, and we were like, we can't do this and not be there for our children. And so we made the decision that I would stay at home, care for our children, raise our children in the city of Chicago. And so I stayed at home, but it was a great experience. But at the same time, I longed for that training and development. And the volunteers that I worked, because I was responsible for thousands of volunteers, they said, Jacinda, are you still doing trainings? Because I would do trainings for the Red Cross. I've had HIV training. I was an instructor trainer. And I said, no, I'm not doing training. And one of my volunteers said, you should consult, because people need you still out there training.
Wow.
And that's why I started consulting.
Wow, interesting.
Yeah.
So I was gonna just sometimes we look at things that are going on in our personal life, and we think that it could be a blessing to change the direction for us to be in something totally different and to really propel us into our career. But I wanted to go back to your time at the Red Cross, because you met a very interesting person at the Red Cross. I know, but you met a very interesting person during your time at the Red Cross.
Yes,
and
I met a senator who was planning to run for the office of presidency, named Barrack Obama.
Okay.
Our President Barrack Obama?
Yes, he was senator then.
Oh, wow.
And I remember him coming, and there weren't a lot of black people at the Red Cross at the time. There's not a lot of staff. It's mainly run by volunteers. But I remember the AmeriCorps members saying, oh, Jacinda, the senator is here. Senator Obama is here. And I said, okay, I've got work to do. Like, I'm trying to coordinate and organize volunteers. I don't have time to do a photo op. And he asked to meet the person who was organizing all the volunteers.
Wow.
And so then I had to come out. And I was like, wow, he's a pretty intelligent guy, Okay, well, let me take this picture. And I remember taking the picture and just hearing him talk about how important it was and what we were doing, and it was a lot of work. That had a huge impact on even what I do today. But I remember afterwards I had emailed my family and I said, I just took a picture with the next president.
Wow.
I predicted that.
Okay.
But more importantly, I believe that now I understand why he was so much of a grassroots person, because it takes those volunteers to be able to really do a grassroots push.
Yeah, and that type of organization to be able to.
And he came and thanked all the volunteers. I mean, that was where he really wanted to see where all the operation was. I mean, the Red Cross had a great disaster operation relief system, and everything was kind of new. But he really wanted to talk to
for him to ask who's over
volunteers doing, what's going on, how do you keep them there. So that was huge.
Wow.
For me.
Wow.
Yeah.
So let's get back to business, because I want to know more about how does cultural diversity really impact the relationships within businesses?
Well, as you see, during this time now, you have a lot of people marketing or having conversations, and it seems a little bit insensitive. And I won't call them out because they've already been called out. But when you talk about culture, anthropology, and that diversity, you need someone at the table of color so that you don't have those types of missteps. And a lot of times companies don't take those things into consideration, what may be inappropriate, what may be insensitive, so that you can move forward. And it's not that they're being racist. Sometimes they just don't know. And sometimes their staff doesn't know. And I have to go back again to having that training and having orientation and developing a strategic plan on if we want to have this campaign, if we want to be in the community, if we want to reach more business partners, how do we do that and be sensitive about it and recognize and appreciate the differences that this country has?
Yes.
So everyone is not the same. You can't put them in a box. It's not a box training. And what I do is I sit down and I talk with the company, the CEOs, and what is it that you need? What are you going through right now? Because there's been a lot of turnover at companies and nonprofit organizations because people don't understand how to navigate through those relationships. They may take them for granted. They may have volunteers come in and you have a turnover. Word of mouth can kill a company. And so for me, I consider myself the bridge to that. Let me help bridge that gap of your communication and your relationships with your partners, with your volunteers, with your staff, so that you can better brand yourself and that more people can participate in the goals that you're trying to set. Because, you know, being an entrepreneur, you get to choose who you want to work with. You still got to work for somebody, but you still get to choose. I enjoy choosing companies that are giving back to the community, that appreciate building us up as a community, not just as Black people or white people. Even working with churches, we have mega churches here, and you want to see more being done in the community. If you have a membership of 500,000, at least half of those people should be volunteering in the community. How do you get them involved to make a difference? And I truly believe we can make a difference with service.
Wow.
It is like Romans 12, that whole chapter. It is your reasonable service. We say your reasonable kingdom service. I beseech you, brethren, by the mercies of the God, that you commit yourselves.
And present yourself a living sacrifice. Yes. Wow.
So that is how you incorporate those things. But relationship is important, and understanding people's culture is also important. Absolutely. Because people bring in a bias.
Yes.
I mean, we can look at police departments. You can look at any entity, any venue, and see where those things have creeped in to destroy a brand, to destroy a community, to destroy relationships. And you cannot take the training and being strategic about it for granted.
And that's the reason why even among the police department, being in communities of color, is very important that they have that type of diversity training, that type of culture training in order to go and serve. They're going to serve in these communities. So it's not about just stopping someone for a traffic light. You're serving and protecting. And you have to be aware of the community that you're serving and protecting.
Yeah, and let me be clear, because people always use diversity, and it's almost they focus on race. But it is everything. It is taking in consideration people with disabilities. They are capable of doing the job. You have to give them an opportunity. It is taking into consideration gender bias that people may have, ageism, all of those isms. So diversity is all of that, understanding all of it. Because just because someone is the same color as you, they may not think alike.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We have our own diversity.
Like they say, everybody with your skin ain't your kin.
Never heard that one before.
So I wonder, Jacinda, in all your years of dealing with volunteerism and working for larger nonprofits, have you ever had to experience where it just wasn't a good fit. Like, how do you deal with someone that's coming in giving free time but it's not a good fit? Or how do you fit the right person in for the right job as a volunteer?
Well, training is important.
Yeah.
So people who come in and think they know it all and they're volunteering, you could be fired as a volunteer. I've had to fire a volunteer.
You've had to fire a volunteer.
I've had to walk a volunteer out and just say, thank you for your service. Here's
They
the
weren't
door.
in their right rank.
Wow.
Yes. So you have to have orientation because people need to know what they're expected to do and what is expected from them, what you're looking for. And so if you're doing a training and you're doing an orientation and they're not doing what you've asked, you can absolutely say, well, you know what, I don't think this is going to be a good fit.
Yeah, because sometimes, especially if you're working for a small nonprofit, you're already understaffed and you may have a few volunteers and you just feel like, well, we can't afford to lose anyone. We have to put up with this from the volunteer because we don't have anyone else. But you're saying that you have
choices because people are passionate about there are a lot of people who are passionate about politics. They may not know how to get involved. And you have, even here in Georgia, you have a plethora of opportunities where you can volunteer and learn some things. But on the other hand, companies need to also take into account that you have very skilled volunteers. Just because they're volunteering doesn't mean that, that they don't have skills.
True.
And they take that for granted as well. We've had volunteers who have masters and PhDs and have worked in corporations and can probably run the company for you, but that's not what they want to do.
Right.
They just want to help in this one particular area. So don't take that for granted either. And hire from within. Small non-for-profits, you have to really look at the resume of your volunteers and say, would you like to do something more? Because you have these skills and open that door up to them to grow your company. You never want to have someone who has a good rapport with all your volunteers and then they leave and all the volunteers leave with them.
Yeah, that's true.
Now, Ms. Beason, you said you had an encounter with a former senator who was president of the United States.
Yes.
Now, has that ever, your volunteerism, has that ever given you an idea that maybe politics may be in your future?
Oh.
You know what? I have considered it.
Being from Chicago,
Chicago's reputation. But I love my city. It is a great city. And there's a lot of work to be done in the city. For me, the Lord has already told me you are the bridge. And I want to get people prepared to be involved.
Okay.
There's not enough preparation. There's not enough understanding. People vote without understanding. They vote because, I think they were cute. Or I like what they had to say today. This person came to my church, but they haven't done their research. They haven't done their homework. I want to be that bridge to help educate and help propel the next person into the position where they can advocate for the people.
well, a lot of people want change,
Yes.
but a lot of people don't want to be the change.
Absolutely.
So maybe you may want to consider being that change.
Well, in what I do, I am being that change because everyone that I touch has touched someone else.
Okay.
So I have the pleasure of going out to a company and training their staff, whether it's 5 or 50, and they get to change their mindset of how they've looked at people as they work in because a lot of companies have volunteerism as part of their company motto, mission. But I've had that opportunity to say, here's where you can make that change. Everybody's position is important. You know, as Dr. King would say, whether you're the street sweeper,
yeah.
you know, that role is important. And so helping people see their gifts
Right.
and how they can contribute, that is where I'm supposed to be.
Well, all right, Miss Beason.
So what advice would you give to someone that's listening right now? And I'm going to ask for 2 pieces of advice.
Okay.
There is perhaps the executive that's listening to you right now that wants to increase the volunteers in their nonprofit? What steps should they take? And then the second part of that is someone right now, they're looking at what's going on in the world. They see what's going on in our political climate and all that, and they want to know, I feel so overwhelmed, but I don't know where to start. So the nonprofit, how do they start to build their volunteerism? Volunteers and the person that's looking to serve.
Okay. So I'm going to speak to the nonprofits, whether it's churches or nonprofits like the Red Cross or even smaller, for that executive CEO who wants to build it up. Find your person who's passionate and knows your brand.
Wow.
Okay.
Because that's the gatekeeper.
Mm-hmm.
You have a lot of people in companies that they don't realize how much passion that they have for their job, and you take that for granted.
Mm-hmm.
But those gatekeepers will bring other people in.
Yes.
And get an orientation so that people will learn about what you want to do in your brand, and they will buy into the message.
Yes.
For the volunteer, I would say start at home.
Wow.
My kids have volunteered all their lives. And if you're a person and you want to get involved, start in your own community. Whether you have children, you don't have children, whether you're a senior or you're going to take your small children, go to the school and volunteer.
You've been on the school board.
Yes,
from what
I have.
Uh-huh.
Volunteer at your local park district. For Chicago, we have CAPS meetings. Go talk to your alderman. But start in your own community.
Yes.
And learn about your own community before you go out and try to conquer the world.
That's that grassroots.
It is.
Mm-hmm.
It is like our President Obama.
Yes.
Grassroots. So that would be my advice. And then for both, keep your commitment that you make.
Oh, wow. That's deep.
Keep your commitments.
Well, Jacinda, is there anything else that you would like to speak to our Speak Out audience about with volunteerism before you fly back to Chicago?
Chi-town.
Well, I would just like to encourage everyone to get out there and serve.
Yes.
It is important. You make a difference, and it doesn't matter what color you are, what religion you are, who you love. You can come together and make a difference.
Yes.
And no one's going to ask you all those questions. They're just going to see the goal getting done. And that's the beautiful thing about serving. Serving in the kingdom of God,
Yes.
serving in the world. It is an opportunity for everybody to be equal. My pastor says it's not equal giving, but equal sacrifice. That I'm going to give credit to Bishop Horace Smith because that's my pastor. But that is what he says, and it is so true. It's not about equal giving. It's about equal sacrifice. And my sacrifice is different than yours. So that would be my volunteer.
Wow. Thank you so
Yes,
much, Jacinda
that was
Beason.
eye-opening.
Thank you so much. And we want to thank you for listening.
Yes.
And remember that you have a voice, so make sure that you
Speak out.